Hey, welcome everyone, study season TE Academy for another session in Live Track 4, reputation-based weighted voting, the A to Z token engineering case study. And we are almost there. So we will open the voting in June. Today we have a great program. I think it's probably one of the most exciting sessions we have run in this course. And while Andrew is finalizing last verification results in the background, typical token engineering issue, you have to present the results. You want to make this very clear and concise and easy to digest. So we let him work in the background. And I just want to let you know before we start the session that minting is open. So I guess you've noticed, in case not, just to let you know, we have now opened the free minting period. So any TE fundamentals exam can be minted free without any fees anymore. And I know we have a number of students who passed their exam for TE fundamentals and waited for the next free minting period to open. It's now open. And you have roughly a month to mint. So no matter if you have passed an exam and are now a while ago and want to mint now, or if you now until July 9th, if you pass a study season exam, for example, you can now mint your NFTs anytime between now, June 6th, and July 9th. And the July 9th date is also the date of the voting results on the voting for the fellowship prize winner. Good. In case you need any support in the minting, we have created a dedicated page on the Notion. So go to our study season information hub and you'll find information with step-by-step instructions how to mint. And in case you still don't know, always feel free to reach out on Discord. Okay. All right, let me just check the chat if we already have a number of questions. No, hellos. Oh, the exams period also extended. Yeah, I must say we extended everything, which is, I guess, cool. So yesterday we extended the exams period for track 5 to next week, but this should not matter in the track 4. And for track 4, you don't have an exam. There is this collecting points, right? Do you remember? So throughout the weeks of collaboration in track 4, you were asked to collect points. The biggest chunk of points can be collected via running a simulation, so there's still time to do it. You have to submit the points you have collected in a form by next Tuesday. So this is the deadline for collecting points and submitting your points. But there's still time and it should be doable. We'll share the link to where to submit it. It works pretty much like in the other tracks. A form, we need your user ID, we need your email to find your wallet address. Please make sure to connect your wallet if you want to receive an NFT. And then a link to your points tracking. Submit it, we'll review it, and then announce the people who will receive an NFT next Wednesday in the final session. Okay. Mate, I'm not sure, June 24th. Maybe let's clarify. I just want to make sure we are all on the same page. It was June 24th for exams, some tracks and TE fundamentals. Hello.
I just saw it in the calendar that, and before you said it was that the exams period was still the 24th of June, I think. And I was just asking if the minting period is now the July 9th, but I just wanted to ask if the other exams should be completed until the July.
Okay, wherever for the live tracks, always follow the instructions at the live tracks pages. So there are some deadlines either for submitting stuff or for passing your exam. And if it says, I have to double check now, but I will, but we really try to keep the dates up to date. If it says pass your exam by this point in time, then this is valid. Even though minting can go on later, because for the TE fundamentals, it's still totally okay to pass the exam later. But for the study season live tracks, make sure to check the information provided on the Notion.
Okay,
Good.
I understand. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay. Good. All right. Let's take a look at our agenda today. We'd like to take a look at the designs again. Then on the verification results. So Andrew collected what we've been able to find out, either himself or other students. And I'm pretty excited to see it, I must say, because I have been so busy over the week for, I don't know if you noticed, we deployed the smart contract where our new NFTs will live at. And this is always a lot of checking, testing, because, you know, you can't roll back on the blockchain. If it's there, it's there. And so that's why I'm keen to see the verification results now. Then we'll have another look at the requirements just to double check, okay, did we go over everything? Can we check all boxes? And then I'll share more information on an implementation check we have been running today with Vitor. And it will be pretty interesting to see then taking these steps towards the implementation, what we have to keep in mind. Finally, we announced we want to take a decision today, a first decision, and then also more information on how to earn your NFT. Okay. Before I dig into the design, I'd like to give you again, so let's recap. What have we been doing over the past weeks? And for us, it was always, yes, we not only want to, you know, do theoretical stuff. We want to build something that will be used. We'd like to get to a real voting with our own with our own mechanism that we designed ourselves. And the process, I shared this, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago, generally is we collect the requirements, then we design, then we verify. And in the verification, we have to narrow down, because we'll learn that with the verification results, we have to rule out some of the voting designs we had because they are just not fit for purpose, or we have to update the design and come up with new variants to then get to the implementation. And we are actually in the very final phase of it. We have been running a first round of verification, and we had some great insights. For example, I think we can say that none of the designs we are currently exploring, so group hug, rank and slide, quadratic credibility, is not totally fit for purpose because, for example, we are not able to find a single winner. However, there are some, yes, great job for all the designers. This is actually a great first results. So you were capable to translate the requirements very well to a design, so that still we have 3 options on the table, and we'll take a look at some simulations to find strength and weaknesses in the design, and then also to take a closer look when it comes to the implementation. And fine-tuning weights. This will be the big topic for the rest of the time until next Wednesday. Andrew and I will work on fine-tuning, and we'll share more information about that. What we have to do, though, now in this session is select one design, because again, we found some strengths and weaknesses in the simulation that we should discuss today, and some question marks when we take a look at the requirements again. And on top of that, this is probably most important, to now tweak it and fine-tune it in the rest of the time. Because we have time limitations, it's better to focus on one design and not try to fine-tune all three of them, particularly because we have some question marks. Okay, so I think, I hope you feel that, yes, we all had this experiment, which would be an awesome learning goal, that this total A to Z case study journey entails a number of different steps for token engineers, where you sometimes have to go wild and be very creative, and then narrow down and be very focused and very precise and very concrete, to then come up with new ideas and a clear plan how to then ultimately land at an implementation. And if you feel that you've learned something like this here, we would be totally happy, because this is actually the full experience of a token engineering project journey. Okay.
Right. Do you want to keep the screen and just click through, or do you want me to take it over?
No, you can share. So I realize you are ready to share the verification result. Before that, I just want to check, are any comments or questions so far? Yes, absolutely. I can confirm this. And this is very, I think it's totally underrated in the token engineering field. Come up with good questions and then define a method how you can answer this question in a verification, in a simulation. Thanks, Joanne.
Yeah, so I don't know how many people saw it in the Discord chat, but I would like to withdraw the group hug from this competition. I still think it's a pretty cool design in many ways, but I don't think we have enough time to verify and fine tune it to the point that we would feel secure about using it.
Yeah.
So I think it would be better to choose one of the other options and not spend time on group hug now.
Cool. Joanne, actually, we prepared some slides to communicate all the all the information that we were able to collect for group hug so far, and then land at the ultimate same result. But I want to praise you for taking this decision, because this is actually best token engineering practice. If you feel that you won't be able to accomplish a solid verification and make sure that this mechanism is robust enough and well tested to provide a good outcome that we can rely on, it's a good idea to probably run with something well explored. And I think this is just this is how we should act as token engineers. So thank you for this comment, and also for coming to this conclusion. And I must say, this is a super, I also confirm, it's a super interesting mechanism. I must say, I would be happy to explore it further. Joanne, happy to discuss, because I think it's just worth documenting it and not just let it go half finished. But we can discuss this.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Good. I hand over to you.
Yes.
Octopus.
So I just wanted to briefly review the structure of the three mechanisms, and I mean very briefly, because they've been available at this point for 3 weeks, and we've had ample opportunity to review them and ask questions about them. But just to remind, since it has been a week or more since we discussed it, there are actually two aspects, which is not something I thought about as a mathematician, to the design process. There's UI UX, which is what the user actually like types and clicks and sees. And then there's the math calculation side, which is where my expertise is more of So rank and slide, what's really novel about rank and slide is this idea of using sliders as a ranking system, hence its name. So this is the real innovation of making voting feel accessible and maybe more intuitive. The math and calculation of rank and slide is very simple, relatively speaking. It's a very well understood mechanism that won't be difficult to implement in terms of the calculation. You just add the points up and divide by the total points for that voter to get percentages. And then the voter can allocate those and then you just add. So all it is multiplication and adding to get to the final result. Quadratic credibility is very similar. Overall, the two differences are that in terms of the ideal user experience, the quadratic credibility designers would like for students to have a clear picture of how many voting points they have before they start, so that matches to exactly how many dollars or other units they're allocating. The math is almost exactly the same as rank and slide until the last step, which is that you're using quadratic voting, which is less intuitive. And so there are square roots at this point, which can cause complications due both to like the arithmetic complexity of square root, but even more so just that people don't have a strong intuitive sense of how their votes will actually count. And finally, group hug, which we're no longer considering. I think it's important to point out that Joan withdrew based on her own simulations and her own explorations, and discovered the challenges herself because it was amazing work. But the UI UX is very straightforward. The voter just selects their single preferred candidate. And then where it becomes more complex is in the filtering process, where these are filtered into separate boxes and then combined, counted separately. And then those separate results are combined again via group weights. So this one has the simplest user interface, but the math and calculation are more intricate and very original. What I would encourage everyone to do is to go look at the materials that the authors themselves provided on the course website, which unfortunately it was my responsibility to maintain, and I have not done a good job of that because I spent more time on coding. But the voting designs markdown page has information provided by the original authors as well that is very good just to review the high-level overview. And so what we want to do is discuss how verification worked. Are y'all with me? Does that make sense in terms of a high-level review? And you can please feel free to continue asking questions on Discord, but we need to move on to verification. So last week we discussed our overview of what the most important things to verify were. And I would say as a token engineer that before we think about optimization or before we think about having a really great mechanism, we want to think first about how to avoid disaster and to make sure that there aren't obvious attacks or obvious pitfalls. And so the initial simulations that we ran were to see if there are any things that would be immediate disqualifications or serious risks that need to be considered. These were based on the things that Angela highlighted last week. So I took her specific questions and translated them and her suggestions of what to explore and translated them to concrete experiments. And that's what you ultimately have to do. I think to be good at simulation, you really need three things. You need the ability to think in terms of high-level risk. Then you need the ability to translate high-level risk to extremely specific situations that can be computed. And finally, you have to have like a tolerance for the fact that your process is imperfect and you're making these unrealistic assumptions, because every model is wrong in some way. It's just that some models are useful for some purposes. So in terms of robustness, we looked at two risks, which are both basically that there could be a group that kind of captures the process. The first is that the decision is made only by the highest power voters basically there's a small group who can function like a dictator, where if they all vote together, no one else's decisions are really counted. And the other one is the opposite risk, which is that you could have low power voters who don't have a lot of NFTs or don't have a lot of proof of knowledge. Hold on, buddy. Who don't have a lot of proof of their commitment to the token engineering community, and they show up in mass and overwhelm the existing community. Neither one of these is good. So this was Angela's original question: how many people who have lots of NFT weight would be needed to outvote all the others? I'm slightly paraphrasing, but that was the idea, right? And this is actually a well-known problem in decentralized systems, and you can measure this risk through a number called the Nakamoto coefficient, which was originated in study of risk to blockchain systems. So it's a very new measure, and it measures basically where this line separating the top from the bottom would have to be in order for the top to completely control things. Now, the thing is, this line will exist somewhere. There is some number where the top voters will ultimately be able to outvote the rest of the people. And we just don't want the line we don't want the line to be too high. We don't want the number to be too small. If one expert could outvote everyone, that would be undesirable. But then it's a little bit tricky. Like if 30 experts can outvote everyone, maybe that's okay. And it's just we were looking for obviously wrong situations. So the way we ran this experiment is using the data that is in the GitHub repo for my simulation engine of default voting weights, and then the cleaned NFT data from a week ago, using this as a realistic-ish information. We started with absolutely everyone voting for A, and then starting at the top with the most NFT weight, we kept flipping votes until we found the number of votes that would be needed to flip the result. And when you hit this number, it's called the Nakamoto coefficient. For rank and slide, it's 84. For quadratic credibility, it's 93. So this says that if the top 93 voters in quadratic credibility all voted the same way, that would be basically the same. This is for a 2-candidate election, so 50% would be what it would be for one person, one vote. These are good. I would say these are good numbers. There are many blockchains where the Nakamoto coefficient is less than 10. So this indicates sufficient decentralization. There's not a high risk of centralized capture. And if the intention is to reward the top voters for having knowledge, it's possible that these numbers could be smaller and still be reasonable. For calculating group hug, I initially had a number, and then Joan correctly pointed out that there were potential flaws in my assumptions. Because it is not as straightforward to determine, it would be much more computationally intensive to actually find the number. But there was a simulation that showed that there was one grouping where it took 120. So that is a upper bound that could be smaller. It would require more work to compute this number, and we don't have that time at the moment, so we're going to move on. Do you feel okay with the Nakamoto coefficient and what it's measuring? And then the fact that for the numbers we have, these look okay. No, there's absolutely no way to determine a number like that without some type of parameter settings that I am aware of. So this is very much going to depend on the weights that are assigned to the NFTs. In general, any of these are going to depend on the specific people who are voting and the specific attributes that they have. And there is no like general metric where you could not know those things and then still compute the Nakamoto coefficient or really anything like it, because it's just too abstract at that point. Great question, though. Number of voters is 347, and that's basically assuming that everyone who was eligible to vote on May 28th would show up and vote. What we will do for further refinement is look at different situations where not everyone votes and see if the Nakamoto coefficient remains robust in those situations. But that's the initial number, and that's how it was chosen.
Also a good question.
Very good question.
Other questions or comments? I must say, yeah, of course, we're generally quite happy that we have such a strong result in the Nakamoto coefficient.
I was really surprised at how well they did.
Mm.
And that's also a credit to you for setting the default estimated NFT weights based on some reasonable guidelines. So the other risk is from kind of the bottom up. You can either have a Sybil attack, which is where you have one person or one organization creating lots of fake accounts to mint easy to obtain new NFTs, and then to just flood with those fake voters. Or you could have a similar thing if there was some sudden external influence. And you have a major celebrity influencer, and out of nowhere, they suddenly decide that they like one of the candidates and they tweet about it, and their followers are flooding TE Academy trying to get NFTs. You can kind of argue philosophically about whether or not these are, equivalent, like morally, but from a practical perspective, both of these are situations we want to protect against, where the signal should not be injected into the system in this way. So I looked at only the easiest one to get, which was study season registration, because you can still get that one very easily, and it has a low weight. Some of the others might be slightly harder to get. And again, with further simulations in the future, we could try more combinations. But for now, this is assuming that all of the incoming noobs, I'm calling them Swifties because I'm assuming that Taylor Swift sent them, that all of the Swifties only have study season registration. So we do this experiment. There are the quote unquote real token engineering community or TEA community. And then there are the fans of Taylor Swift, who is a major American pop singer who has very devoted fans. And she has said, I think candidate B should win. So if the entire community were thinking that A should win, how many of these new voters would be needed to flip the election? And I'm going to call this the Swiftie number because it's memorable. One thing I learned from y'all is the importance of memorable names. So the names y'all came up with were so descriptive and actually captured a lot of what the mechanism was about. So I'm trying to do that now with my metrics and KPIs that simulate attacks. So the Swiftie numbers are huge, and the current settings, it would take a mass influx to overtake the community. And we would think that probably TE Academy would recognize that this was happening and be able to step in if you had to swing this dramatic. Now, this is assuming that the entire community was behind candidate A, and in the future we could do simulations where we made a less drastic initial assumption. But this is decent. If this number were like 100, that would be very bad. And one thing to point out is that the way group hug is designed, it is Sybil proof. So no matter how many Sybils or Swifties come in, it won't be swayed. Quadratic credibility, you're always going to expect quadratic voting to be more Sybil vulnerable than other mechanisms because it's intended to amplify low amounts. So that's one of the drawbacks. It diminishes the impact of whales, but it really amplifies the impact of low voters. But even with that said, this is a great number in terms of, security that we would, I wouldn't have a lot of obvious concerns. I wouldn't disqualify it based on this. This is very reasonable for the experiment we ran. The second thing we wanted to look at was making sure that knowledge and experience actually count.
Andrew, maybe a quick pause.
Yes. Mhm.
I just want to pick Saremba's question. You said this is not exactly about the mechanism, but are there any ideas, expectation of how many voters might want to vote? And we at the moment have 345 that would be eligible. We expect this number to grow. However, it might only be a small portion. We had number one, in the requirements, I set up the goal that we'd like to have 100 voters in the voting, which would be around a third of the current people eligible. And then for coming up with simulations that cater our assumptions about the final voter participation would be now the fine-tuning, part of the fine-tuning, because you are right, we should take this into account, that the actual number of voters, the absolute total number of people eligible, is not enough to fine-tune. Okay, Felix, you raised your hand.
Yes, hello. Can you hear and see me? Okay.
Yes, we can. Yeah.
Perfect. So my question is because I really had problems to come up with the right questions. And with right questions, what I mean is I separated the questions that are related to fine-tuning the mechanism than to just discover desirable properties. So for me, it was really difficult to come up with any question that is related to the properties of the mechanism, but not how you fine-tune the mechanism, right? So the most things I came up with would have ended up in a result like it works if you do this kind of fine-tuning. And so I really don't want to duplicate your work, Octopus. It was so great insights. And so my question is, are there more directions to discover more general properties of the mechanism than dictatorship and civilness? And if there, what kind of questions or what directions are they?
So I didn't really get a chance to look at what you did yet, but I'm looking forward to that, because the difficult thing for me as an engineer, token engineer, someone who came from math, is making all these assumptions. So we picked one weight mechanism, one weight setting, just to see, is there a weight setting? And the thing is, if there's a weight setting, then we can go, that works okay, then we can go back and make it better, right? So we're kind of just looking for initially, it's like a rope or a box, and you're like gradually tightening it down. So all you have to do is chip away a little bit at a time and see, did that do it? And there's not going to be an ultimate answer, right? We know that about voting mechanisms, that there will be even vulnerable regions where bad things could happen no matter what weights we pick. And so it's just more at this stage about making sure that if you push on the house, it doesn't just fall over. And then we do more rigorous testing once we get through that first stage. That's my perspective on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. So just to recap a little bit, that I understand it correctly. So you meant that it's not like if you are going to make some assumptions for your verification, like it's always okay to assume something and then go back and change it, and that's kind of the process, and you don't have to keep it completely general like until you go to the fine-tuning, right?
Right, exactly. And that's a mistake I made when I first started doing this, is I tried to test everything at once. But you really just have to start with something specific, and then you can move different places once you have a starting point. in terms of the directions that would be good to go, I think that is really based on what the TA Academy wants out of this voting mechanism. For instance, I would say that for the purpose of what we're doing, a Sybil attack would be a successful Sybil attack would be way worse than a smaller dictatorship, because the goal is to give knowledge weight. And so if we give knowledge too much weight, well, you know, maybe that happens, but that's way better than going on the other extreme and not giving knowledge enough weight, since that's the goal. And I'm speaking for myself here, and if Angela, if that's incorrect, please tell me.
No, agree. And I think, yeah, verification is, that's why everybody's talking about this iterative process. You have to start somewhere, and somewhere, I mean, an easy gain is to just start with the actual current numbers we have, and be sure that we don't run with a lot of assumptions in the first place. And of course, then this gives us pointers towards, okay, here we have to further explore and now take next steps with different scenarios and more assumptions involved in the verification.
I guess my question always, do we know more after we did this than we did before we did it? Right. So like you had those great puzzle piece emojis. All of these are puzzle pieces, and we put them together to get the final.
But thanks a lot for the answer, like cleared up a lot.
Thank you. Great question. So I want to move now to the question of NFTs counting and who is doing that. So I wasn't able to do this in as much depth as I would have wanted with different stakeholder groups. But since we now have sort of an initial framework, next week we could look at some of these specific questions that we pick out as being things that are most impactful to know. And we will continue some of these simulations next week, both to verify that the weights are selected in a reasonable way. So overall, I would say that all three mechanisms have, based on this initial experiment, they're all very good mechanisms that could work well for this purpose, and they don't have any obvious defects. Obviously, we're going to test more. There are a couple of things to point out in terms of the intended purpose. So as Joan has already said, it's more difficult to verify group hug than the others, just because it's not as familiar to us, and we're dealing with more exploration to do. Then quadratic credibility is going to, by design, decrease the impact of the most people with the most NFTs. And that may not be, and probably isn't, what we want for this particular use case. So if I were making a recommendation to a client, I would say, let's focus based on just this concern about risk of attack or risk of failing to meet the most important requirements. I would recommend going with rank and slide, although I think the other two are awesome mechanisms that could be great for other purposes, or after we do some more experimentation with them. And now,
Awesome.
Yeah. So now I hand back to you.
Okay. Yeah, first, number one, it's quite good to land at a situation like that, right? Where we can point to insights we gained for choosing the best mechanism. For me, again, this is token engineering. It's not about the fanciest thing. It's not about getting everything. It's about finding the best that fits a purpose and supports a certain goal. All right. Even though I enjoy the learning journey quite a lot, and I'm happy we found some really cool mechanisms in the course of this track. All right, now I'd like to take the other point of view again. So like Andrew Octopus representing the token engineer here, and I'm the client, so to say, or at least the person who's looking from the voter's perspective. And let's take a look at the requirements again after this first round of verification to make sure to not miss anything. I mean, at the moment, we're focusing on some very particular properties of a voting design, and I'd like to invite you to again take a look at the requirements together. First of all, there was one aspect where we say, okay, the voting should be according to true preferences. And roughly, this is what incentive compatibility means. I mean, there's a more specific definition and mathematical definition of incentive compatibility, but I guess we can all agree on we want to avoid strategical voting so that voters actually vote on a candidate maybe only to let another candidate not win, right? There is this typical phenomenon in crypto, whales coming in last minute and flip the voting, and it might not even be in their favorite. So for turning the vote towards their favorite outcome, it might be only to rule out what they dislike most. And this is what we want to avoid. We want to have voting according to true preferences. Next one. Here, there were a lot of requirements collected in the early stage of requirements priorities, where we said, okay, it's about participation and transparency. We want to have a transparent voting mechanism. A user should be able to know how much reputation he or she or they have built over time in the token engineering community. Then next one, we wanted to say, okay, we have a low quorum. One vote would be generally enough. And the target is to have minimum 100 wallets participating. Again, so we have to think about how can we encourage the maximum number of people to take part in the voting. The third one, voting mechanism simplicity. We want to have a mechanism that is simple enough to facilitate voting, but sophisticated enough to create a good outcome. We would like to have verifiable results. So the community should be able to verify the results of their voting and overall outcome. To me, this is still not solved. I think there are ways to verify it numerically. The question is if we can provide this during the voting. But I agree that this is definitely something that should be our goal. Then good usability, develop an interface that is easy for participants to navigate, view their reputation and facilitate the casting of their votes. And the last one, sufficient and easy information about the voting, ensure to update the community about the achievements of each candidate. And this is what we plan to do. And this could be made on each session as a praise for teaching, share the result on Discord, create a leaderboard. I mean, we didn't implement the leaderboard, but there's round by round and session by session updates on social media and on our Notion, sharing the recordings. And now for the voting, we have to make this accessible again to provide best information for voters. Okay, so looking at these requirements, oh, and there's one more, the timelines, of course. And here's an interesting element. So we are 1 week behind schedule already. So we will check the final voting opens, voting close dates, and might delay this period of voting. But still, our hard deadline is we want to have the results announced on July 9th. And there was some other note on that I'm not sure if everybody realized. And this was in the requirements as well, we don't want, it's not only that we make this big announcement on July 9th, we don't want to reveal the voting results earlier, right? So the results should not be visible during the voting and only be visible when the voting is over. And this creates some conflicts with the transparency aspect mentioned earlier. So provide clear information about the impact I have, and also strategical voting. Because if I know that I have almost the maximum impact looking at my voting weight, of course, this encourages strategical voting. Okay, some food for thoughts here. Now, how did we run the implementation check and what were our conclusions? Again, 1 week behind schedule. Whenever you'll implement something like that, this is already not good, but we'll manage it. It's not good and at the same time, not unusual. All right. First of all, due to this delay and due to other reasons, I'll get to it in a moment, we still favor Snapshot as the platform to vote on. Why? Because it's familiar to most people ever participated in a voting. So it's certainly beneficial to go with something that is familiar to many. Then all the functionalities are already there. We checked all 3 mechanisms with Veto today and know how we could or cannot implement it in Snapshot. With all other tools or own tools, we would have to verify still if and how it is feasible. And we would have define all functionalities first, not only the voting mechanism itself, also anything around the voting mechanism. I just want to highlight some things so that it gives you a picture of what implementation means. This would be how and where can I access the voting? Is it a web page? Is it an application? Is it running on a mobile phone? Can I use it everywhere or only somewhere? Then how can I connect my wallet? And of course, we want to make sure that I can not only use MetaMask. It should be okay to use all kinds of wallets, particularly in our case, where we encourage the students to use this wallet long term. Actually, in some sense, we enforce it because the NFTs are non-transferable. So it's very likely that they use more, let's say, that they use hardware wallets, that they use different kinds of wallet. Over time, this will be ever more challenging because they might use, let's say, some very old wallets. You can't transfer it. How can you, throughout the life cycle of our NFTs, how can we still support any wallet? Again, we have to take this into account when it comes to the implementation. And even, by the way, Uniswap had issues recently with stable connecting wallets. So this is not only a challenge for small communities, it's a challenge for even the big players. And then last but not least, with Snapshot, we have an UI we can build on where you just know, okay, here is where I click to connect my wallet. Here's where I enter my credits and so on. And with a new solution, you have to think about how to best represent it. Of course, you can build on what already turned out to be a good structure, but then you still have to define it, and not only define it roughly for implementation, you have to define it pixel by pixel. So the software developer has to know exactly how this should work, not only the voting mechanism itself, everything end to end for a user journey. And that's why, again, we are looking at Snapshot. Now, rank and slide, feedback from the implementation. The voting mechanism is super easy, super straightforward to implement, no problem. It's just that we might face challenges with the slider because this is the current interface of Snapshot that would be closest to our idea. So here you can insert numbers It's basically not even saying this is the minimum, the maximum. You can insert any number here, and then it distills a percentage based on the numbers, and then you submit your vote and see that this vote has been counted. And by the way, so this is number one challenge. So this is the current implementation, and it might be different from rank and slide. We think that this way of giving a percentage could still be a good way to implement rank and slide. Vitor is in the background still exploring if we can implement a slider. So it will be either off the shelf, this solution, or the slider. And for the slider, we have to, again, specify what we'd like to have. So this is on the rank and slide. The rest would be green light. And before we move on to the next mechanism, also take a look on the right side. Currently, snapshot is the default setup is that at any point in time, if a voter votes, this vote is counted, and then the results show up on the right during the voting. And this has pros and cons. It has pros on the transparency side, because yes, I can see my impact. And I might be even able to derive my voting power. However, it can also have negative effects on the strategical voting. Good. Then let's move on to the next. Quadratic credibility. This is an interesting case because here on the UI side, we have several challenges. So number one, we cannot show credits per voter easily. Felix, I think the first idea was like, or the general concept is built upon ERC20 tokens, right? Just like in, for example, quadratic funding as well, where the number of credits is read on the blockchain, right? Versus in our case, we have NFTs that have a certain weight. So this derived value of credits we would have to either translate it to tokens and send it to the voters, or we have to run with a layer in between where it's just virtual credits, right? So feel free to make comments here, Felix.
Yes, so you're totally right that the main idea was intended to be realized with ERC20 tokens that are used as voting credits. But you're not the first one that is mentioning that it could be really high fees for different voting scenarios, right? So this already came up, and we already thought about some possible solutions, and maybe it's more useful to just store the credits as a number in the smart contract itself and read it out with the front end and then display it for the users. But we haven't decided how we are going to change this part of the mechanism. So that's also something that is not really figured out, what kind of disqualifies to do it like this. Yeah, but was perfectly explained. Yeah.
Octopus, anything to add here? No.
It's just something I wouldn't have thought of. It can't be caught through simulation. I mean, it's half the battle, and it's great that we have people who understand both and can really make sure that there's ultimate product, not just like a theoretical algorithm. And I'm so grateful that the designers have been so gracious and not like tried to cling tooth and nail fighting for their algorithm. There's been a real community spirit of trying to get to the same goal together.
Good. So I have more concerns and comments on quadratic credibility. But again, this is reality. You have to check against reality. Even if voters would have this number, they don't know what it means. So even now, imagine we find a way to easily calculate the number of credits, show them as an actual number. We would have to, I mean, this number alone wouldn't mean anything to the voter, right? Because they can't put it in context. Now, if we would put it in context, you have 10,000 of in total 40,000 credits, then this information would be meaningful. But then we might run into other issues when it comes to strategical voting. And last but not least, if they knew their voting power, after all, we still have this general challenge of quadratic voting, that your actual impact on the total voting outcome depends on the number of people who come in and who take part in the voting. So it changes in the course of the voting, and it also changes due to the actual NFTs. So it would, the voters' impact on the outcome would then, even though if we want to show it and if we want to make this transparent, it would then, due to quadratic voting, be again not clear because of the voting mechanism. I hoped I summed it up. Can you follow, everyone? Can't see the chat at the moment. Thumbs up. Okay, good, thanks. Yeah, and then finally, here's an interesting insight. And this might lead not so much to, oh, sad, you can't use this mechanism. It's rather, hey, this is an interesting information for Snapshot, because it's actually, it's missing the capacity to split up votes in buckets. So any of such an algorithm that is like working in a fashion like GroupPuck, like a neural network style counting of votes, it's not feasible, because what Snapshot takes in can't be broken apart, then individually calculated towards a certain outcome and then be accumulated again. This is today not feasible, but it's this again is a roadblocker for us at the moment, but is an interesting design and feature aspect when it comes to Snapshot. Good. Overall, after the implementation check, it's again rank and slide with, yeah, let's check if we can make the slider happen. And I guess we'll be in touch with Jonas to see how he envisioned the exact how the slider should be shaped, and how to best implement it in the spirit of, okay, let's try to make the requirements become a reality with transparency. What I would, so basically on general, the voting design, I would now, I hope that you all agree, and we can run a quick hands up for, do you agree with rank and slide? I think there's no dispute here, right? Given the information we have collected so far. So confirm, please. Yeah, if we are in sync here, rank and slide is the thing to continue with. Okay, we have 4 votes pro: Victor, Saramba, Joanne, and Felix. This is our threshold for accepting it, right? Or should we run another Discord? No. So you have all seen it. We share it on Discord. That this is our selected voting mechanism for further exploration now and fine-tuning the weights.
Can I butt in here?
Yes.
Just for one small thing, because I realized that this question was asked, and I realized that sort of from the point of view when taking what's the word, when querying groups about, like when doing opinion polls, how question is formulated can extremely strongly shape the answer. So I think the question was are people okay with this choice, rather than who votes for this choice, who votes for the other choice. So I just
Correct.
wanted to check what was the intended question. Is it that suggested choice is this, and is anyone sort of introducing a veto or strong opposition, or was it who votes for which one?
The question is, do you agree that rank and slide should be the voting design we use?
All right, so basically asking if there's any like opposition.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
cool.
Still, we are still at the same outcome? Everyone? Okay, good. Thank you. Worth clarifying. Here's another comment. Joanne, would you like to switch on your mic, or should I read it?
No, I can read it or say it. I was just wondering, it would be so fun to take the voting data once the voting has taken place and run it through the different mechanisms
Oh, yes.
and compare.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I'm just wondering if the sets of NFTs would identify some of the experts, because then sharing their voting data would probably be a problem. But if we can't identify people by their NFTs, then it might be perfectly fine to do so.
Yes,
Just,
we can.
I throw it in there as a question. It would be awesome.
Yeah. First, I totally agree. I definitely want to do this. Second, even with anonymized data, we can, or it would be, if someone wants to, in some cases, easy to identify. I think we have the lowest number of holders, TE fundamentals authors, and their names are public. So some aspects to keep in mind, but generally let's explore, let's find out how we can run this. I would be definitely keen to see the results. Good. And one more, we can run a second decision making. Also quite a simple question. If you look at this screen, and if we think and remember transparency versus strategical voting, what do you say? Should we make the current status of voting visible or invisible? Okay, invisible. Any other opinions? Invisible? +1, okay.
Could I
Tough
make a
choice.
comment?
Make a comment.
About Angela, can I make a comment about why I would support invisible?
Yeah.
I think if it's visible in any way, then people might be incentivized to do a vote just to see what's happening with a fake wallet, and then come back and do their real vote. So any kind of information leakage is kind of a risk like that.
This costs is at the cost of transparency. So to just this is the downside of it, right?
Right.
We could make everything transparent. We could even distribute the weight settings beforehand. But then the downside is of it is strategical voting. Okay, so I must say I'm also in favor of not showing it, but we can make it a Discord voting to allow those who have not been able to join the live session to have a say as well. And define this on Discord, I guess. I'll open up the Discord voting just with this emoji clicking and until tomorrow or so. All right. But thanks for the input so far. And I think, again, this is taking the full picture and finding the best design overall, looking at the requirements. Good. Let me take a look. I think we have covered all the verification information. I think what's left for the session today is logistics on the days left until the final session until Wednesday. Before I share this, are there any final comments with respect to voting design, verification, GitHub repository, whatever? And just to let you know, it's not a hard stop for you to say, stop verification simulations. If there's still one question you want to explore, go ahead, do it. I mean, the model is there. You can use it. It's just we won't go back to other voting designs. We now will continue with rank and slide, final detail visibility to be defined, but rank and slide and fine-tuning weights will be the steps we take for the fellowship voting. But this should not stop you from exploring any questions you might want to answer. Yeah, and thanks, Saramba, for the comment. Based on the outcome of the voting and seeing if there were some great difficulties and unexpected effects, we might be able to have visible voting in the future. Right, I think this, I mean, the idea of Joanne has a couple of, or inspired or brought up a number of other questions. So like, is this community, are they aware that the different groups even exist? I mean, we introduced weights now, but this is the first time. And there are multiple options to develop this understanding if we feel it's relevant for the community, and make this much more visible in the community, not only for voting, but generally. So I must say, yeah, total agree for, I would say the best voting design for a community should evolve over time. And this is the best we can have today. For a next fellowship voting, we might be able to have more information or a different style of displaying weights or different insights on behavior, and could come up with a new design or an adapted design. 100%. Good. Then, any other comments? Okay. Then I'll just continue with some logistics, because you all have made great contributions to this live track. And now it's the time to take a look at the points you've earned. We'll have to put together all information, so we'll provide a form so that you can submit your points, like as you might have already used it for the other tracks, track 8 or track 1. So a form, we'll publish it on the Notion. There'll be a template, the link again to this markdown file. And you feel free to count the points you've collected yourself. We'll share a list of these have been the points you can collect, and then please track for yourself what you've achieved. Submit it via the form again until next Tuesday. And then the session next Wednesday, so at the usual time next Wednesday, will be about sharing your learnings. So we'd be happy if you come up with, these are the have been the 3 most important learnings for me. If you like to share your Python models again, or any other stuff you're working on, whatever it might be, welcome. Let's have a casual last round with on top of the Andrew working on, because when we talk about this is now about fine-tuning weights, we plan to run a session next week, us two, to work on the fine-tuning, record the session, and then share it with you. And your homework, so to say, would be collecting points and make sure you submit it in time until Tuesday. And then we evaluate until Wednesday and have the NFTs for you and how we fine-tuned the weights and the results. And on top of that, here's an open invitation. If you are interested to see how this then finally will become a reality, including the actual algorithm that is implemented, how the snapshot integration worked, how we compile the information to voters and distribute it. If you want to participate in this journey and want to contribute, support it to make it happen, we would be. However, if you say I have collected, get the knowledge, that's it. So both is fine. A final session next week, Wednesday, June 12th, same time as today.
Sorry, Angela. Might you repeat the last bit about how we can? You're saying if we want to follow how this goes, then what? Because the stream fell out for me.
Okay, so the idea, so I thought, okay, we have come a long way, and on one hand, we want to give the live track students now this, okay, I'm finally done, and that's why we'll collect points now and distribute the NFTs based on what we have achieved so far. Nevertheless, of course, we are not finished with making this a reality and rolling out the experiment. So there are some steps needed, like the implementation in Snapshot, the final definition of the specification, actually, how this should be implemented, the final algorithm, the information distributed to voters, etc. And if you guys say, now I want to see the full story, and I have some time left to contribute to that, most welcome. So this is all I want to say, without an obligation.
Did you also mention how?
I guess some ideas are how. So what should be the information we share with the voters? How testing the interface, certainly always a topic. Let's test it if it works as expected. Checking the algorithm that we'll finally implement, such topics. I don't have a finite list at the moment. It would be rather, okay, let's create a Discord group and see what comes up and who wants to take over or contribute, rather shaped like this. So feel free, drop me a note if you're interested. Okay. Octopus, are we missing anything that we wanted to cover? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to just say one thing, kind of as we're wrapping up this work portion now, that y'all have impressed me so much, and I don't know if anyone has ever done this before, or you had a sprint class that was also building an actual thing and exploring the design space with the intention to actually use what was built. With, y'all have been amazing, and I'm grateful that I got to be one of the instructors of this class, and I hope that you've learned something useful, and the learning journey continues. So please, if we can do anything before the final point state to support you and with that journey, but also there's a larger learning journey that we're all on to learn about best practices of professional work and tokens. And I'm just really thankful to y'all, and look forward to hearing your learnings on Wednesday. And I'm amazed that we did it, in all honesty. Not surprised, but am amazed.
Yeah, because maybe I can share, when we talked about the scope of this live track, we were both pretty nervous because we said, this is what we are dreaming of. Teaching token engineering is not easy and it's definitely not solved, but this is what we are dreaming of. And let's, okay, but there are many unknowns. And yeah, let's do it. We just want to try it out for once. And that's why we are super happy to be at this point. And I hope you are too. Okay. Good. So I save my thank you and goodbye words for next week. But yeah, thanks, Joanne, for mentioning this. I'll drop a note. Maybe we should open a separate channel to, or a thread at least, for finalizing the work. All right. That's it for now, right? First time we are finished early. Oh, Saramba. No, we're not finished.
Yeah, I'll try to. I just wanted to
No,
say
this
that
was not my message.
yeah, so I just wanted to say that that was pretty awesome, and as I was not able to maybe participate as much as I wanted, I still have some bits and pieces that I need to go back to recordings or read. Like reading Discord kind of in time, I find that very overwhelming. That's not sort of like a very easy and accessible like tool for me, I suppose. But I also just wanted to mention, I think Madhuri maybe talked to both Angela and Andrea to you, but I thought I'd mention that Madhuri, who is like we both participated in the Women X in Web3 study group, and from lots of discussions, we started to have some ideas about some research that we wanted to do, and the NFT reputation-based module, and definitely this session is actually giving us huge amount of inspiration for the research that we want to work on, which is how to be able to include lived experience in sort of participation of building the community. So the first thing that we actually thought could be a step there is also to look at situations where there is voting on some decisions. So not necessarily thinking about how to shape communities straight away or how to shape the whole governance, but also focus on situations when there is some voting, and kind of we have mechanisms for voting that can weight lived experience more. So this is because we were coming from like various underrepresented groups and various sort of maybe marginalized experience, but we thought that this also would be pretty interesting in situations where there might be a project sort of like almost like charitable project to help with some community, but somebody's coming from outside the community, and there is always a risk of being having the savior complex and deciding on something that the community doesn't want. So the experience of community should be something that should have actually higher weight for the decision. Or a slightly similar but slightly different example is if there is a case of maybe a project that can come with side effects for some special communities. So let's say, I don't know, planting more trees somewhere, or I don't know, some sort of like ecological project, which can mean, for example, that some communities might lose some of the ways that they get money because maybe they can no longer have free access to some area. So we thought that this, like all of the work that's being done here, is just such a huge inspiration. So thank you very much for that, and I'll be trying to work on with some of these ideas from here in that research that I mentioned.
We would be absolutely glad to see that, Saramba, and also Maturi and the team. If this is of any value for your work, perfect.
Thank you.
Victor, you also raised your hand. Victor, still here?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. Classic. So basically, no, just for the last minutes, I just wanted to ask you something, because I'm sure you put a lot of work into choosing the weights in your default system that I saw the CSV file. And I just wanted to know, can you like just take a couple of minutes to give us a little bit of a rationale, like what went through your head when you put in the numbers, because I think that would be very helpful for the next step. And I'd be super interested in helping if that's possible.
100%. So happy to share. Maybe we should take a look at the. Has anybody the spreadsheet just in front so that we can take a look at it together?
I have just the CSV file open, but I think there's a better way.
Well, no problem. It's just we just need the weights column and the NFTs. Feel free to share your screen. Otherwise, I have to search. Okay,
give me one
good.
second.
This is the diagram where you analyze it. Yeah, and here's the spreadsheet. Okay, good. So just to give you some insights, let's start with the lowest weights. Lowest weights is 1 for the token engineering barcamp team and for the people who registered for the study season. This is for the barcamp team, it was that just students at the location just signed up to support us. And this in itself does not say much about their token engineering knowledge. They might have followed any of the talks, but some just showed up in the morning, disappeared in the evening, helped us greatly in the course of today, but it's not a really good testimonial to their token engineering skills. And so on top, if we have other NFTs on top, of course, then, but only this individual NFT, certainly not. Then let's go to NFT-based. Wait, I feel that in NFT-based reputation in Web3, is it really 3? Might be the, yeah, I know why. NFT-based reputation in Web3, here the knowledge is actually very relevant, but the exam is easy to game. And that's why I decided to give it a lower weight, because if it's easy to game, it might be also an attack vector and a vulnerability for the voting. Okay. Then we have the other middle range TE fundamentals. This is certainly harder to acquire. That's why it has a higher number. TE Fundamental Study Group host even higher than at 10, because these people, invested their time to run minimum 3 months of learning sessions. So it's a great testimonial for their commitment to the field. And the other one is that for running learning sessions, you have to know the content well. So they didn't only learn themselves, they explained the content to others, structured the sessions, made sure that minimum 3 people acquired minimum 3 of their participants acquired the TE fundamentals NFT, and that's why they receive 10. Fellowship committee, here we selected 5 people with great experience in the field. That's why it's 16. Also study season speaker. I mean, look at the lecturers. And then the highest weight to the course authors, because they basically invented what makes up this discipline, what defines this discipline, how the token engineering process looks, and invested a lot of thinking and working on it. This is why they receive the highest weight at the moment. And now the next step is to fine-tune these weights to see if we have satisfactory outcome on a variety of scenarios.
Okay, that makes absolute sense. Thank you very much.
Good. Andrew, any other comments on approaching fine-tuning?
I do feel at this stage we want to be as transparent as possible, but we also don't want to give any leak any information to people who might be thinking about an attack. I think an attack is very unlikely. Knock on wood, like we have a great community that's very diverse, and that is one thing that I noticed is like there aren't really the types of groupings that we discussed. It's more that different people have different NFTs all over the place, and you can't divide. There isn't like an opposition of where these are the experts and these are the participants. Rather, lots of people have lots of attributes of those. And that's another thing that helps protect the process, that we're not likely to have like direct conflict between 2 groups, for instance. So I feel confident that we will find good weights, and we'll share the process by which we found them and what we were looking for, I think.
Okay. Again, we stay in touch on Discord. I'll share all the information needed for the final steps for you guys, and everyone who is interested in contributing to the final steps needed, super welcome. If you like, optional. Has no impact on your NFTs. Good. All right, thanks for the session. I really enjoyed it today. See you on Discord and see you next week, next Wednesday.
Thank you and bye.
Bye.